Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Eon Network podcast. I'm excited for all of you guys to join us here today. I'm Adrian Matt, your host, and over the past couple of weeks, we've been touching on so many different subjects. I really cannot wait for this episode, though, because we're going to be touching on the subject that I'm actually quite interested in. And we are also going to be joined by a guest, our own Humbler97, an Eon Network member. And welcome, Humbler.
Thank you.
And today, again, we're going to be talking about none other than electric cars. And we know that a lot of people say that there's so many good things about it. It's friendly environment, or I should say it's really good for the environment, environmentally friendly. It's efficient. We know that for a fact. So I have to ask you point blank though, what is it about electric cars do you think that you may support or may go against?
Most of the things that going against electric cars, especially in like racing, most of the people watching racing are there for the sounds of the engine. And that's also one of the reasons why Formula 1 has been sort of on a downhill, because they just added a hybrid system and they're turning it into like 50-50 now.
Oh, so 50-50. So you tell me, so there's actually people now that are interested only on the sound that it makes
Yeah, there
from
there
what
are
you
a
said.
few.
Wow. That actually, okay, so that's quite interesting. I didn't know that that was even the case. I can't believe that there's a lot of people out there that are actually, basically going for the sound itself. And when it comes to electric cars, one thing that I also wanted to talk about was the battery lifespan. I mean, from what I see here, it says that many people do worry about how long their EV's battery will last. And they say that apparently the typical EV battery warranty is around 8 years and 100,000 miles. And really, I mean, the lifespan, I can see why there's a lot of people that are concerned about it because, I mean, it's not necessarily as much. And if you replace the EV battery, that's going to be a lot more expensive than what people probably initially think.
Yeah, it would be a lot more expensive than, say, like replacing like some sort of like fuel tank item on like a regular gas or diesel car.
Yeah, correct. And also, what's interesting about electric cars, though, is that, I mean, again, there are some pros to it, right? As I said, I mean, it's efficient. People are going to be using it for the environment. That's all good and well. That's basically well and good. But I mean, the fact that you have to charge your car as well. And I was reading an article the other day that apparently said that, sometimes it will take up to 30 minutes to charge your car for it to reach to at least 80%. So let's say if you're driving your electric car in the highway and you're running out of battery, you're going to have to stop by at a station that allows you to recharge your car. The only problem is, again, it's only going to take about 30 minutes for it to reach to only 80%, not even 100%. So, I mean, it really does take a long time for people to really recharge their cars if they are going to be using electric batteries for the cars themselves. And just imagine how scary it would be, though, if you think about it. And this really happens. I'm not going to lie to you. This really does happen, though, with cars that actually run in fuel, or in this case electric cars. It can happen in both sides. However, just imagine how scary it would be if you're driving down the highway, right, and it's late at night, or you're in the middle of nowhere and your car just suddenly loses battery. Now, again, it can happen with people who use fuel and gasoline. But if you're going to ask for help, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a lot easier for people to help you out if you have a car that runs in fuel as opposed to electricity. Because not a lot of people, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of people out there that do indeed drive electric cars, but more people are driving the cars that basically use the regular old gasoline. So, I mean, I feel as if there's a lot of negative effects to it as well. And I know you said that you don't support it at all. And I'm with you 100%. I mean, again, we'll talk about the pros in just a minute. But I'm just saying that I feel as if perhaps maybe that it could be really, really bad for a person if you're driving one day and you run out of battery. Who do you ask for help? Because not many people really have electric cars.
Yeah, exactly. So there's basically three things you can do if you like run out of electricity in your car.
Hmm.
You can either one, call a tow truck to tow it to a charging station. Two, try and push it to a charging station, which
Yeah.
is not plausible.
Right.
And three, wait for another electric car to come by with with a cord that goes from their car to your car, and they can give you a little bit of battery just to get to the next charging station. But the efficiency of that is the problem because you can't take electricity from the station and bring it to your car, which you can do with gasoline.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say too. Because
Mm-hmm.
with gasoline, that's another good point that you just made moments ago. I mean, yeah, with gasoline, on the other hand, you can actually fill up a tank, for instance, and take it anywhere, as opposed to electricity. I mean, it's going to be really hard for you to do that. In fact, it's not necessarily possible for you to do that. You're going to have to go to a station itself that does carry the electricity for it to definitely generate the car again. So, or at least generate the battery. So it's a really good point that you just made there. And I think, I mean, I can see the idea. I really can see why people use electric cars. I can. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of people out there that do explain that it's much better for the environment. Obviously, it is much more. It's much better than cars that run in gasoline. Obviously, there's less pollution. Obviously, it's going to be things that will eventually help out the earth down the road. I mean, if everyone actually were to use electric cars, um, basically it's not only going to help the earth itself, but also if you think about it, of course, overall, I mean, there's going to be less maintenance for a lot of these people. But again, it's just, I don't think perhaps maybe we're living in a world where it really is as efficient as you would think. Because again, if you are going around using an electric car and you really just, what happens afterwards, as you said, you made up some very good points there. You can call it tow truck and that's fine. But moving your car to a different station, as you said, that's not possible at all. And then you have to wait for a car that perhaps may have a charger that would go from their car to his or anybody else's car. And that's going to take a long time because you just don't know how many cars that are going to pass by that actually are electric cars. Again, for the most part, people do use fuel and gasoline. So electric cars really are. I mean, let me ask you this question though: Do you see people ever? Do you see ever? People ever really going um, to electric cars in the future? Do you ever see electric cars really dominating maybe in about 25 years or so where we're at a point where everyone almost has one?
I see them being more popular in like that 25-year span, but then after that 25 years, they're eventually just going to ramp down because we're going to eventually run out of lithium and we're going to run out of silicon for computers.
And that's another good point too, because I've been reading an article with the mention of that and how computers themselves are going to be affected as well. A lot of people were saying, how do computers really have anything to do with the electric cars and so forth? But you're right. I mean, lithium is a huge, huge point. It's a huge factor when it comes to this, which can affect down the road the use of computers and what and whatnot. So it could be really, really. I mean, I think I'm with you. First off, I truly think that within maybe 25 years, a lot of people are definitely going to be getting more and more electric cars for sure. But at the same time, you're right. I feel as if perhaps maybe using all of this for the next couple of years, for the next couple of decades, using all of that would really affect and negatively impact many other factors that we're actually doing here, that we use here on Earth. And I feel as if that could be a very dangerous thing if you really think about it. And, you know, the fact is, I truly think, in my opinion, obviously people make the choice. It's going to be up to them at the end of the day. But if I were to really recommend someone, do you use gas or electric? And I would actually recommend them to make sure that you use gas because it's a lot safer. Now, again, there's always a side to every story, right? There's one side that said, yeah, use gas because of this and that and that. And then there's another side that goes, no, don't use gas because of this and that and that. And I mean, I can see the advantages and disadvantages of both. I really can. But I feel as if perhaps maybe it's just much more reasonable at this point in time to just continue using cars that are just running from fuel. Um, and, the thing is, again, you can't really travel as far. And refueling or recharging, from what I understand, takes a lot longer as well when you're using electric cars, and we talked about that before. So these are things that people really need to consider when you're using electric cars. And I do like the idea that it helps the earth. It really does. Obviously, we need that nowadays, honestly. But the fact of the matter is, though, you really have to kind of pick and choose. And I would say maybe the cons outweigh the pros because, first thing, again, you can't travel as far. I mean, if you wanted to go state to state, let's say, you could do that. Yes, if you're finding charging stations, but it's going to be really difficult for you to do that. But again, you can't really do as much, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Gas stations are so much more common in the U.S. and everywhere around the world. Much more common than EV charging stations. And also the difference between like Tesla chargers and if you have like a Kia or a Ford truck, Tesla has a different charging cord for
Mm-hmm.
that. So you have to find like your type of charger, like your type of charging station for your car, and it's so much more difficult than just going to a gas station and getting gas.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you must be, I mean, there's going to be okay, so there's going to be a lot of limitations at that point, you know?
Hmm.
And let's talk about the finance as well, because electric cars tend to be more expensive up front than the, gasoline counterparts, and yeah, there are incentives out there that really try to gravitate towards the idea that, hey, listen, you can use this for you to make sure that you can help the earth and the environment. Um, but there's just so many different things. There's different layers that will eventually actually cost probably more than that of a gasoline car or a car that uses just gasoline. So, people do say that, hey, well, it's better for finance. I disagree. I think it actually has higher costs, um, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah,
Now, what do you
like
think of that finance wise?
it may be cheaper for the person buying it, but for everybody else, it ends up being more expensive for them because of like tax money used for the government to buy like silicon and lithium from Africa and like manufacturing bits from China. It's going to be so much more expensive for other people for everyone but the person with the car to have an electric car.
Yeah, and you're using all these, right? You're using all these different resources from all over the world, different countries, especially China. We talked about China really in the last couple of years. That's a controversial story, how China's been spying on us and all that stuff, trying to beat our economy. And the fact is, if we're going to be buying a lot of their stuff, of course, that's definitely going to boost their economy down the road. And, they're going to definitely profit from it. So there's just, again, there's so many different layers to electric cars that I truly think that the cons do outweigh the pros. And a lot of people don't really understand that at the moment. And I feel as if a lot of people are as aware when it comes to buying electric cars, because on paper it sounds good. It sounds great. Yeah, it's environmentally friendly. Boom. Okay, let's go ahead and do this. But you have to look at the different limitations that electric cars do pose, and you have to ask yourself the question, will it affect me? And for the most part, it probably will. I mean, if you're a person that drives around the neighborhood, okay, and you're not a traveler, you're just going to the store, you work here, blah, 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 then you can make the case, okay, electric cars, fine, you're not traveling too much. I know the expenses are going to be higher in the future for sure down the road if you're going to be doing or if you're going to be buying different parts. But overall, I can somewhat understand that. But not a lot of people are like that. They use cars for long distances if they need to. So I truly think that electric cars do have a lot of cons with them as opposed to the pros. Now, I mean, you have to at least, though, understand that electric cars, the intentions for electric cars are for the good, obviously, would you say?
Yeah, the intention of the electric cars is definitely for good rather than bad. Well, you're not gonna make a. Well, I'm just gonna skip that. Never mind.
It's all good. Um, let's talk about, though, cars that do use gasoline. And we were saying how obviously that would be the better choice as opposed to electric cars. But there are some cons when it comes to gasoline cars. Or, basically, gasoline, they produce a lot of emission. There's carbon dioxide, there's nitrogen oxide, things like that. So it's going to contribute to air pollution and global warming and health issues. So this is a very big problem because over the last couple of decades, really the last 5 years or so, we have been hearing a lot about climate change. We've been hearing a lot about global warming and that Earth is getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And obviously, with so many people, billions around the world that are using cars that use gasoline, it really is emitting a lot of carbon dioxide that, in essence, does absolutely produce and attribute to air pollution. And people then have respiratory problems health wise, and in earth wise, it's definitely, of course, hitting and destroying the ozone layer, and not just that, but also it's affecting the world as we speak, and that's the reason why Earth continues to get warmer and warmer. What's your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely a factor, but like we've built machines to control the weather. I'm pretty sure we can build a machine to like suck up air and purify it from carbon dioxide.
That's actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because it was a few years back. I was in it was about maybe 3 years ago at this point in time. I was actually taking a class where the question was, if there's, if you were an inventor, let's say, and there was a way for you to stop pollution, what would you do? And that's what I put in my essay. That's exactly what I put. I was thinking that there's got to be some sort of system that I'm pretty sure that we can create. I mean, technology is through the roof nowadays. That I'm pretty sure we can create a system that'll allow us to suck up the air, as you said, and to purify it, and for us to basically continue from there. And that's something that we could do, and that's something that I'm kind of shocked that it hasn't happened just yet. But you have to also understand that there are so many people around the world. Would it perhaps maybe have? Would it be enough? Would it be enough to suck up? Let's just hypothetically say these machines are stationed around the world. Would it be enough for it to suck up all the air and to purify it? Because there's just so many people around the world. There's so many cars out there, and there's just so much that you can do. So I get your point, and that's exactly what I said in an essay years back. It's funny that you mentioned that because that's what I also said. But at the same time, though, if you think about it on the flip side of things, you know, would there be enough of that? Do you think?
I think if it was like a widely produced item, even if it was like the size of like one of those like World War II computers, it's like the size of your garage. I think even if singular like family people couldn't buy it, I still think that factories and public places would have them, and I think it would be enough to suck up enough so that nobody would die. Well, not like
I think
nobody would die, but
right, right. And that right there makes sense for sure. And we're gonna have to see, we're gonna have to wait and see what's gonna happen down the road, whether or not if this is gonna be something that we can absolutely do in this world. And I think it could be manageable. I think it's doable for sure. There's always gonna be different factors, but I truly think that would be the case. But let's talk about oil spills on the other hand. Because we do, in order for us to get gasoline, obviously we need to drill for oil. And that sometimes leads to oil spills in oceans, rivers, all that. And this then affects the marine life, birds as well, other animals. And it just takes so much time for it to clean up. Now, there was an oil spill, I would like to say, I don't remember exactly which year, but I would like to say either 2010 or 2011, one of the two. One of those 2 years, there was this major, major oil spill. And it was on the news in all different networks because it was huge. I mean, the tank exploded and boom, all the oil, of course, spilled right into the water down below. And it affected so many, I mean, there were so many horrific pictures of, marine life just absolutely bombarded and just completely enveloped in oil. And not just that, but also birds as well, just enveloped in oil. It was a huge, huge spill. And one of the biggest spills, really, I think it was in the Gulf of Mexico. Let me do a fact check real quick because I'm pretty sure. Again, it was either 2010 or 2011. I'm gonna go ahead and quickly check this out real quick. But I know it was one of those 2 years, and I know that it was, I think, in the Gulf of Mexico. But I just want to be 100%. Okay, yeah. So Deepwater Horizon oil spill, April 20th to September 19th, 2010. This was at the Gulf of Mexico. Think about that for a second, Humbler. April 20th was when the entire thing exploded and all the oil went down. And then it took them until September 19th for it to get cleaned up. That's almost what that's really almost that's over 4 months, I think. Could be a little bit less than that. But nonetheless though, that's obviously months upon months. And there were 11 people killed, that's what it says here. That was horrible, and it did affect the marine life a lot of times. So that was a very interesting story that took place. You can look it up online if you never heard of it. It was just a major spoil. It was a major oil spill, and people just were absolutely shocked about it. I was shocked about it because you can see the pictures, and the oil was just spreading all over the place, and just tons upon tons of oil was just spreading through. And again, you can see pictures, unfortunately, of the marine life being affected by it, and just I think it's something that a lot of people need to really understand, that despite the fact that gasoline cars do absolutely 100% probably would be a better choice over electricity or electric cars, that's one of the major cons. Oil spills is something that we do, unfortunately, I would like to say unfortunately for sure, but still it's the case that we do continue. I mean, there's some minor oil spills here and there, and there's some major ones. But at the end of the day, that's one thing that you really have to understand. And I just think that right there is sad. It's kind of sad to me, being able to see oil kind of ruining um, marine life, especially.
Yeah. And also the reason that there's so much oil being brought through like the Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico is like importing it from the Pacific rather than getting it from like Texas or Canada out west.
Hmm.
And it would just be there would be so much less oil in the ocean if you just brought it from like the same landmass as you're on and not put it on a ship.
And that could work, I think so. But I mean, that would be also if you think about it, though, that would be a very difficult thing to do for it to be a true landmass as well, because there's got to be a lot of imports and such, and you have to cross country to country as well.
Yeah.
So that would be difficult.
Yes, but like think about the amount of oil in the US. Tons.
Hmm.
Like a
Right.
lot, a lot. Probably, if you add up all the stuff in North and South America, it's probably enough to get the entire continent through, like temporarily. If you just use your own
Yeah.
oil, I think it would like get you to the point where we used a lot less oil and we'd have to use less of it, and we'd be more focused on like hydro and wind power and solar power and all of that.
And at the end of the day, with technology increasing, there's got to be ways for us to do it much more efficiently as well. And it would be a great idea. It would be a good strategy for sure for us to make sure that we are able to put that in fruition. That way we can definitely avoid any more oil spills and other negative impacts. So that's a good point. And I would like to say we're about to hit the 30-minute mark, so we have one final point that I would like to make. And this is probably one of the biggest ones that people talk about when it comes to gasoline cars. And it's really, really hard to maintain. We're talking about regular maintenance. We're talking about oil changes, all these different tune-ups that people need to. So if you're not up to date with your car, you're more prone of it breaking down, and it leads to just expensive repairs. And unfortunately, in the year 2024 that we're living in, the economy here in the United States, really around the world, but nonetheless here specifically in the United States, it's not the best. And we're really facing a financial crisis. I'm not sure if many people, of course, can really afford any more breakdowns in cars. Of course, spending a lot of money. It's a sad thing, but it's true. What are your thoughts on that? The fact that it's really harder to maintain it compared to electrics.
I think that if you find like if you go to more like a local thing rather than going to like I don't know Mr. Lube we have in Canada or like whatever like chain of mechanics you have in the US,
Hmm.
you find like a local thing. and it's probably much cheaper because they get like the parts like right from wherever. They get the labor is probably less expensive because they don't have as many employees.
Yeah, and that right there, I mean, that really can allow people to really help themselves for sure, and it wouldn't really be as expensive as you stated. Um, but unfortunately, for the most part, though, cars obviously are expensive for it to be repaired. Bottom line, and like I said, I mean, economy is not really doing well nowadays, and I think a lot of people are just looking to take a break, catch a break at the very least, and for them to really understand that, hey, you know, because there's a lot of families out there that cars, their cars broke down, and they don't have a second option, or perhaps maybe they have to walk. They have to walk now to whether if it's work or school or whatever the case. And I think it's just something. I think it's something that people need to understand as well when it comes to gasoline cars. But we talked about the pros and cons of gasoline cars. We talked about the pros and cons of electric, or I should say electric cars. And at the end of the day, I stand by gasoline cars for sure. Now, we talked about the cons, obviously, but I truly think that the cons aren't as bad as that of electric cars because there's just so many. I mean, I feel as if people might be more prone to danger if they're using electric cars because if they get stranded out of nowhere, literally out of nowhere, you said it yourself, you can at least bring tanks of fuel. And if you ever do stop out of nowhere, at least you'll have maybe buckets or little tanks to fill up the gasoline. But for electric cars, if you're down there in the middle of nowhere, you're kind of done. Unless if obviously you definitely do call for a tow truck. But still, I mean, it's not as protective than that of a gasoline car, if I'm being honest. So once again, to end the podcast, I have to ask you right now again, you stand for gasoline cars over electric cars.
Yes, absolutely.
And do you ever see, to finally end this show, do you finally see, perhaps, maybe, gasoline cars ever really getting replaced? Let's say now, instead of 25 years, let's put now 50 years from now. Do you ever see them getting replaced by then? Or do you think that they're a staple and this is something that we're going to be using really for the rest of time?
I never see them being fully replaced. I always see them being as like a viable option for transport, but I do see electric cars getting more popular in the future.
That's a good point, and I do agree with that 100%. I truly think that electric cars down the road are also going to gain popularity, and more people are going to buy them as the years progress. But with that being said, I do want to thank you so much, Humbler97, for joining us on the podcast. It was an absolutely incredible broadcast. I think it was very, very fun to talk about cars and the fact that electric cars, they're gaining in popularity just a bit, but it was very, very worth noting that there are some cons behind it. But nonetheless, thanks for joining us, everybody. We hope you enjoy the podcast. We will see you next week for more topics, some interesting topics that Eon Network Podcast is willing to produce. Hopefully you can catch us next week. Make sure to not only comment and subscribe, but to also like the videos. And really, honestly, comment what you think down there. If you disagree with us, if you agree with us, or whatever, just make sure to let us hear your opinions. That is probably the most critical part for us to listen to you and for us to understand where you guys stand, for us to understand your perspective. So I encourage you definitely to comment down below. With that being said, again, for Humbler and I'm Adrian Matt, thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next week, guys.